Our off-season kickoff here in the Hyundai Texans radio studio with Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio. Nick, thanks a lot for being with us. Well, congratulations on a great season. I know the conclusion wasn't what you wanted, but your thoughts as we get into 2024 on a spectacular 2023, really.
Yeah, did a lot of good things this season. I think anytime the season ends, it's kind of mars maybe what the positive things you accomplished during the course of the year, but players and coaches did an outstanding job to get to the point where we did accomplish a number of things. A lot of credit to the players for their effort and the work that they put in. Coaching staff, there's just so many people that put a lot of time, a lot of effort into this. Certainly disappointing at the end, but Baltimore's one of the best teams in the league, and that's the competition that we're dealing with in the future. So, but their players should be proud of what they accomplished and what they've done. Really the reality is we kind of put a bow on the 23 season, and now it's about 2024 and putting the 24 team together. But certainly a lot of good memories. Nobody could take it away from anybody, but now we got to move forward.
Nick, it was almost a year ago where D'Amico was announced as the head coach, and we've talked about this a few times. But since we're at this point now, thinking about meeting him and getting to know him, hiring him to where you guys are now, what's this year been like doing this alongside D'Amico?
Yeah, it's been awesome. And the reality is, it's funny. He's the same person the day that we hired him as he was after the Baltimore game. His consistency, his attitude, what he brings to the table on a day-to-day basis, it's just infectious. And the team and the building, everybody fed off of it. So it's been awesome to work with him step by step. We're excited about what we put in place this season, and we're looking forward to the off season and continue to build on some of the things that we have in place.
When he's asked about expectations back in the off season prior to the 2023 campaign, he says, well, the team you guys put together, you guys expected to win. That's always the expectation, to win football games, as many games as possible. What were your expectations versus what you saw?
You're always looking for progress. That's the most important thing. And then, are you improving? And as we put the team together, we felt that we would have a competitive team. And nobody really knows what that entails, what that means in terms of wins and losses. But we felt like we had enough good players that if we went out there on a week-to-week basis, we'd at least give ourselves a chance, an opportunity to potentially win some games. Started off slowly, and then kind of hit our stride there a little bit, 1 to 2 games. So what you want to be able to do is get off to a fast start. We didn't really get off to a fast start, but we're able to kind of stem the tide there a little bit, and then we kind of worked through the course of the year. And essentially every game, other than a few, we were in every game. We really didn't get blown out of too many games, but we were in a lot of games, and we felt with just the makeup and the composition of the people that were in the building and on the roster that at least we would have a chance and have an opportunity, and it certainly came to fruition. So our job is to just focus on the short term, just focusing on team and individual improvement, and let some of the other things sort of take care of themselves. If you have good process with the right people and you do the right things, then you would hope that correlates to wins. And, fortunately, that was the case in a lot of situations this year.
Is there any moment, Nick, Marc and I have ours, when I know a lot of Texans fans have theirs, coaches, players have theirs. Is there a moment that stands out to you most about this 2023 season?
It's probably difficult to just pinpoint one.
But
give us a couple.
I think the Pittsburgh game, was certainly a good team victory because we got contributions from a number of different people in a number of different phases, and that against a good team.
Yep.
I mean, they were a good football team. We're talking about 2 good edge players, good offensive skill players, and we played well. We played with the right mindset. We played with the right mentality, and we did some things, I would say, in all 3 phases where when you look at that game, you say, all right, that looks like a pretty good football team. I think the road win in Cincinnati, was certainly, a big win on the road against, one of the best teams in the AFC. And we played well in critical situations and critical moments. So there were just at different points, you're able to see kind of the evolution of the team take place. Kind of hit a little rut there with the Jets game and kind of right around there. But at the end of the year, we ended up winning, 3 of the last 4 of the last 5 before the Baltimore game. So, I think everybody realized there was an opportunity for us to maybe put ourselves in a position to do something pretty cool. And we've talked about this on the show. There was a collective belief amongst one another, Like, hey, maybe it didn't go well the week before, but we believe in what we're doing, believe in the people in this room. And we have enough in this room. D'Amico has multiple times, whether it's video or whatever it was, we have enough people in this room to believe in one another. And I think you saw that. So it's a credit to the players. It's a credit to the staff. So I think there was, I would say, glimpses at different points. And then as we got going there midway through the year, and especially after the Cincinnati game, all right, we might have a shot here to put ourselves in a position, but anything that comes down to individual execution in each game, and we kind of took a week-to-week approach, and, at the end of the year, we were playing pretty good football and put ourselves in a position where we have a chance to play January football.
Well, you won 11 games total. You did a lot of great things. When you look at it in the grand scheme of things, what do you want to see done even better as you move forward into 2024?
Yeah, we understand this team's going to be different. The 2023 team, like, you kind of put a bow on that. Now it's about the 2000. We have 35, 36 players that are going to be free agents. So there's going to be a lot of new faces, a lot of new players on this team. We have some, I would say, young players that will return. We have some players, veteran players that are under contract for future years. But I think when you look around the league, and when you even look at the division games over the past weekend, every game was a one-score game. Other than, it was 10-10 at halftime in the second half. We couldn't really do anything. We didn't stop them. We didn't get enough first downs, and then the game kind of got out of control. But I would say when you get to January football, your ability to run the football, your ability to stop the run, your ability to play physical, and the takeaways, like, those are areas, if you do them well, you're going to have a shot. So what does that look like in terms of the team composition? That's what the next however many months are for. And then once we have our team sort of put in place, once training camp rolls around, because the team, as we all know, is pretty fluid. So what the team looks like in April is different than the team is going to look like in July, is different than the team may look in September. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a understanding of the mindset and the mentality that's going to be required to be successful here in our building. And then it's always going to come down to execution. Can you execute your job, the details of your job, on a consistent manner on a week-to-week basis? So ultimately, that's not going to change.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of nice, Nick, I got to admit, that this year, and I don't know if you'll go to the Senior Bowl or not, but at least during Senior Bowl time, you won't be locked into finding a new head football coach. How much of that, I don't want to use the pressure, but just that the onus of adding the head football coach, taking off your plate, taking off everybody's plate, really kind of opens you up to do maybe a little bit more as the team building part goes into 24?
Sure, the arc of the offseason just takes on a little bit different shape. That's a reality of it. So we're pretty well positioned. So we're kind of at a different point than we've been in previous years. So we know what's in front of us. So all-star games, offseason, the combine will be around the corner before we know it. We're probably, a month away, less than a month away, or give or take. So you can just kind of transition into some of the, let's deal with our team, deal with our players. What's the status of some of your players in the offseason? Players need surgery. They're going to be right at the offseason program. And it's really, we're starting to have discussions about free agency. So you just kind of move the calendar forward a little bit in terms of your roster building, offseason preparation. We're in a really good spot where there's a lot of work that's gone into this point. Now it's a matter of kind of taking a big list, shrinking that down into a targeted group, and then focus on the players that they think are going to fit on a myriad of levels, and then get that information to the coaches who will obviously be involved in the evaluation process and the team building process. So their input, they'll probably have an opportunity to go to the combine, whereas last year they didn't have it. So everything kind of just gets moved forward a little bit, and hopefully we can just stay ahead in terms of our preparation and roster building.
You signed a number of players to the reserve future contracts, and that happens right after the season for every team, I guess. Can you explain to the fans what that means? Some familiar names, guys who have been around here.
Yeah, sure. Typically, it's most of the players that were on practice squad. So practice squad players, those contracts expire essentially a week after the season. So essentially, they're free agents, but the vernacular this time of year is reserve future because it's for basically after the Super Bowl, where they're kind of in a different category. But essentially, they're mostly practice squad players that are just signed. They're under contract for the 2024 season or through the offseason program. So the idea behind that is so they can kind of start their offseason, their training, February, March. They know kind of where they're going to be. The offseason program will start middle of April-ish, sometime in there. So it's just that pool of players, and you're kind of making it official that they're a part of at least a 24 roster for the time being. So most teams are going to re-sign, not all, but all of their practice squad players. You may not re-sign some. You might tell some players, hey, look, let's wait until a bit later on once we kind of have a better idea, so you can be a little bit more honest and forthright about what the opportunity is. So, so that's kind of that category of grouping of players.
All right, I want to ask this, Nick, because I think explanation of it is paramount for fans, for listeners to understand. Well, you got cap money, you got to go spend it. I know you love hearing that because it's like you've got this blank checkbook and you can go spend, but everybody knows, okay, there's a little bit of cap money, all that kind of stuff. But how do you approach that in your role? Because as you said, there are a number of our players that are seeking new contracts. You've got players out there from other teams that could be there. And then you've got this cap money and all that kind of – how does that kind of all go, and your thoughts about all that? Because you're going to hear, well, you got this checkbook. You know what I mean?
It's not an unlimited budget.
Right.
So we always start with our players first, and we can talk to our free agents from now up until the start of free agency, March 13th or March 11th, whenever the negotiation period is. So you have an idea of maybe what their market may look like, what the range may be. So what you try to do is try to create some buckets and then project, this is where we think these players are going to fall. And then you look at your allocation of resources. If you sign X number of players at a certain level, that means you'll be able to acquire and sign less players at a different level. So it's all about resource allocation. We're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can, but also if there's an opportunity for us to get a player and there's a cost associated with it, then we just have to weigh the benefits and the risk reward of that. So we're well positioned. We have some flexibility, but we also have to think, I would say, a little bit towards the in-season component as well, because you have to factor in practice squad, injured reserves. So that's going to eat up a certain chunk. Sure. So if you use every cent and every penny in the spring, no problem. What are you going to do on the back end? Right. So, I mean, it's as simple as we're balancing a checkbook here. You want to make sure you don't have any overdraft fees, so you want to make sure that you stay within the rules. And if you go over a certain level, the league is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, wait a minute, like you have to do something. Right. So there'll be opportunities for us to acquire players, and we've shown a willingness to spend. I think one thing that's a little bit different maybe the past couple of years, we don't have multiple first-round picks. So when you have multiple first-round picks, there's a cost associated with that, so you kind of have to budget and plan for them accordingly. So we're in a little bit different situation than we've been. We certainly have some financial flexibility. Part of the evaluation process right now is taking place. Acquire this player. Here's the cost associated with that. And really, you have to look at it. The cap, the salary cap charge is really, you're talking about year one and year two. And then the bigger the number, then it's going to eat into future years. So some of this is finance 101, but we're also, if there's an opportunity for us to add a good player, like if we think that's the right thing to do for the football team, then we're certainly going to do it.
All right, so the information that you have available, it's voluminous, because sometimes we see on Twitter or X one little video of a guy running around, oh, look, he can do this. But you guys can pull up every third down route for player X for the whole season, right? Tim Bragg and his crew, and you have all this information. Can you take us inside a little bit to tell us?
Yeah, that's technology has come so far. So you have access to, if you want to watch a certain corner and look at just specifically all of his targets, it's a matter of 2 clicks, and there's the video. Then you can go through all his targets, and then you can do your evaluation on a player in less than an hour versus something that could take maybe a day or so. So the speed with which you can make an evaluation and the access is a lot quicker, which is the benefit of everybody. So a coach can say, I just want to watch so-and-so, these plays here. Or you go in there, you click. If you want to watch a receiver, all his inside the formation plays, because you think like, well, that's what the role of the player is going to be. You have the ability to evaluate that. So it all goes back to evaluate the player. What are his strengths? What's the role we foresee for that player? How are we going to utilize that player? And then there's discussion between whether it's the offensive or defensive coaching staff. Here's how we see the player. Here's how we would use him. Okay, great. Do we have a unified vision? That's step one. Then step two, what's the cost associated with that? Okay, well, the players think their market is this. We see the player valued here. Can we come to a point where we agree, or do we have to go another direction? So all those things between now and call it March 11th, like that's what's going to take place.
You're deep into it from, I know your college scouts are deep into it because there's probably been 3 or 4 All-Star games that not a lot of people talk about already that have already been out there. Now you got the Shrine Bowl coming up and you got Senior Bowl coming up. But Nick, one of the things, and we actually talked about this a little bit, I want to hit on this. There were about half of the players that declared early than we've seen in prior years. There was a number, it was growing up in the 130, 140 range, and I think this year was now 60. Do you feel pretty well positioned? Like, okay, we did work on those guys, but they decided to go back to school. Okay, let's shelve that, and we can focus on the ones that are actually in there. How do you guys feel position-wise as it pertains to the draft?
Yeah, absolutely. We go through the course of the fall, and we evaluate players based on maybe what we think is going to happen, understanding underclassmen are going to factor in some way, shape, or form. So it's interesting. The board is sort of built as you go, August, September, and then to December, and then we have the official declaration, and we go back to the board, and maybe you had a player that was up there. Okay, we'll take him off.
Right.
We can eliminate him. So what happens is it may increase a pool of other players in other areas who want to make sure that we go back and are really diligent about the pool of players that are actually available. Do we have the evaluation right? Do we need to do a little bit more work? We know there's going to be 250-ish, or whatever the number is, players that are drafted. Doesn't mean we're going to have draftable grades on 250 players. So we're still going to kind of take a targeted approach, but there's just less players that are available. And it is just the underclassmen typically make such an impact on the draft. And this year more than any, they're going to have less of an impact.
Along those lines, Nick, when you have a player that, I don't know, maybe in his second or third year, and he's in a particular region, and you have a scout in that region, and now the transfer portal sends him, I don't know, he goes from Miami, he goes to Washington. Now all of a sudden you've got another scout that's looking at him. How do you kind of marry the two together? Does it actually make it a little bit better because you've got two sets of eyes on him at different points in his career?
It's a great point. So we're going to pool all the information anyway. So let's say you have a player, it's Ohio State. So whoever is the Midwest scout, you're going to have their background information. You probably have 2 or 3 people that go through the school are going to have a report. Then he goes from Ohio State to Miami of Florida. So that's a different area scout. Right. So you get another set of eyes that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have. So all that information gets populated into our main database. So whatever report, whatever information we have from whatever school where they were, we're going to have access to that.
Right.
So is it the information similar to what we had here? Is there something different? What's different? What's changed? There'll be some players that have literally been to 3 or 4 different schools.
Right.
So you're trying to take all that information in, still arrive at a snapshot and a summary of like, here's what we think the player is. Here's what we think he can be for us. Here's what his character makeup says about him. And in the end, we're either going to be comfortable with that player or we're not. And then once we get him here, they're essentially back to square one because they have to learn the elements of our program. What's important? Do they assimilate with the players? Do they fit? Team fit and makeup is absolutely critically important because who you're in the room with, if you have the wrong composition of people, ultimately that's going to affect what goes on the field.
Yep.
Well, it's got to be interesting in the meeting rooms when you're evaluating a player, and some of this is subjective, right? You just don't know until you know, right? So there's some disagreement, but healthy disagreement, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of good dialogue, a lot of constructive dialogue, and if we can't agree on a player, then likely we'll just leave him where he is and go on to another player because we can't really arrive at a consensus. So we're never going to make a decision in a vacuum. Well, in the end, somebody's going to override the other one. Ultimately, we have to make a decision that we feel is best for the Houston Texans organizationally, not one individual.
We talk about guys standing on a table for a player. Has anyone literally stood on? Never mind. I can see myself
they
doing
bark
that.
loudly. No standing on the table.
Give me a kicker. Along those lines, Nick, when you're, and I know this happens, and I think about Will Anderson because just from what we were able to hear, like out in the public about a guy like Will, that a big part of his evaluation, in a sense, was he was an alpha. Like he was a dude. He was the leader of that team almost from the day he walked in. And those are intangibles that, people that just throw on film, they can't see, but you have an opportunity to understand that as you talk to coaches and you learn more about the player. How much is that in the evaluation process? Like, yeah, we see this guy, we see what his fit is and where he could fit for us. But man, in the locker room, this guy's an absolute dude, and we'd love to have him because of the intangibles that other people can't see.
It's a huge part of the evaluation because the reality is the players are with each other for X number of hours on a day-to-day basis. So they're in the meeting room, they're in the dining room, they're in the locker room together, they're on the practice field. And everybody's going to necessarily have to like each other, but there has to be a healthy respect for one another. And players, young and old, have to figure out a way to work with one another. And I think a lot of young players sometimes are a little bit hesitant. They always want to defer to the veteran players, which they should. And it takes a certain level of humility and emotional awareness to realize you have a lot to learn. You have a job to do, and you're respectful of the people that are there. And I think if you show that, I'd say, degree of humility to veteran players, they develop a healthy respect for younger players. I think the worst situation is when you have a younger player who comes in, acts a certain way, and he really hasn't done anything or really earned anything because you've either played a lot of football without that player or won a lot of games without him. So that's where getting the right person with the right mindset is critically important. Yep. And it all goes back to, you know, what D'Amico has talked about, like the swarm mindset, the relentless mindset, the team first attitude. So, and players are smart. So they see when somebody comes in the locker room, does he have those attributes? Are you guys practicing what you're preaching? Or are you doing something different? You're saying one thing, but your actions suggest something else. So this is where a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussions take place. And we have to be very, I would say, diligent and intentional about who we add to the team and the reason why we're putting them on the roster.
Well, I'm not in the locker room, but it felt like this team was real together. This group you had in 2023 achieved that, what you're looking for. And I know every year is different, but you had to be happy with that part of it.
Yeah, they were very connected. I think they cared about one another. They wanted to do well for one another, and there was a healthy respect among each other. And you saw that in how they interacted with each other, whether it was on game day, whether it's during practice, how you practice. I mean, we're fortunate we had very few, I would say, dust-ups or issues during the course of the year. So that's a positive reflection of the coaching staff and the way D'Amico handled the team. And ultimately, it's, you know, a sign that the players did the right thing along the way as well. So you're never going to necessarily reduplicate. We're not going to have the same team. That's the reality of it. But in terms of the components and some of the dynamics that are important to the team, like, we're not going to lose those, and those are going to be at the forefront of our mind as we're building the team out.
I know we'll take a break from radio for a little bit. I know the coaches will get a little break. I know D'Amico talked about, you know, his wife is pregnant. And I know we're right in the midst of draft season and bowl season, all that kind of stuff. Are you going to get a break a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be the Senior Bowl next week, so
no.
I'm sure my wife is ready to hit me
because
over the head with a sledgehammer. But
this is a really busy season for you right now, right? This is the kickoff.
It's like busy season for accountants. This is their time.
Yeah, here we go. Nick, there's going to be a senior showcase. This event has happened for years at the Bubble at the Houston Methodist Training Center. This is for high school athletes in the area to audition, if you will, for D2, D3, NAIA opportunities, and millions of dollars in scholarship funds have been awarded over the course of years. I know you went to a D3 school. What kind of opportunity is that for a young athlete to get that chance?
It's tremendous. I mean, any opportunity that you have, you should take advantage of. And the reality is there's so many good football players out there in the country, and they come from a variety of, I think sometimes the focus is always on the Power 5 and Division I, but there's a number of players in the history of NFL that have come from lower level programs who have gone on to have successful careers. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great platform for players. Anytime you have a chance to get in front of people and to be able to compete with one another. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to play football, even though it was at the Division III level, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, some of my best friends are some of the, still to this day, those are some of my teammates. So there's a lot of good players out there. There's a lot of good people. You really never know where they're going to come from. And we don't care where you come from, how you get to the team, where you were drafted. It's ultimately just about what your performance and what you do when you get that opportunity. So sure, it'll be a fun event, and it's a great chance for those players to compete and put themselves into position to maybe prolong their careers.
Well, it's just an opportunity to play more ball. And I think for young players, a lot of times they don't know a lot of the schools that are out there. We're like, wait a second, I can play football at your school and I can get some scholarship money, and they just don't realize it because they see the Texas A&M, the Texas, but they don't realize there's Southwestern, there's Trinity, there's other D3 schools that they might have an opportunity to go to, or some they may not even know that might end up in Ohio, like Mount Union, like that great school.
You went there. Or John Carroll.
I had to get one in.
Okay.
I had to get one in right at the end.
Get Cecil Shorts on here next. Nick, thanks a lot for all the visits all season long. We appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you guys.